welcome to What the Heal. My name is Maria Sellars, and I have the honor of being here today with someone I've met in, I think, the last 6 months, back in September, Ben Tung. So thank you so much for coming in and being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I am too. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We met at a Spinal Energetics training out in LA, which I think in the US there's only maybe 30 practitioners.
I think something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So there's so few of us, and it was so cool to be all the way out there in LA and meet you. And there was someone else, she's from about an hour from us, Talisa, and then also your wife.
My wife is trained as well.
Yeah, she had taken the training before us. So I'm like, holy cow, out of, there's so few practitioners in the US and only 500, I think, across the globe. Mm-hmm. But to have all of us here, it was so exciting.
It was cool.
It was like one of my favorite parts of the training. So now you get to be here on What the Heal. Thank you.
Cool.
Good time. So let me tell you a little bit about my friend Ben. He's been a chemical engineer and has his master's of business administration. He's spent the last 25 years working in microelectronics and aerospace industries. 3 years ago, he had an unexpected spiritual experience while in hypnosis that started him on a spiritual journey of sorts. Now, he's a certified clinical hypnotherapist, also trained in spinal energetics, and he really enjoys helping people start their own spiritual journeys through energy and trance works, especially other analytically minded people, by making this topic area safe and accessible to them. So powerful. I love it. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So tell us, what the heal has gone on in your world?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm super honored to be here to talk to you. I will tell you that this conversation is really, really unique and special for me. I've been on this sort of spiritual journey now for, I'll say, like 3-ish years, and I'll tell you the story as we talk today. But I really don't talk about this topic very much with my normal community. So this is, in a sense, like a spiritual coming out that we're doing for me right now, which is really, really fun and exciting, but a little scary as well. Yeah. So I'm super happy to be here and talk to you on this topic.
Wow, that's powerful. A spiritual coming out. It's one of my favorite ways to term it, but to have the opportunity to share your journey. And it's one of the most powerful things that you can do, because in sharing ourselves through this type of way, you never know who you are going to reach and how your words will impact them and how your journey will impact them. So Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and step up and share.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for seeing that. I think, as I mentioned, I consider myself a fairly analytical person, right? And having spent as long as I have in the industry that I've worked in, there's just a certain way of thinking that goes along with the type of life and career that I've had up to this point, up to 3 years ago, when this sort of transition started for me. And I kind of want to start just sort of explaining with some context about the way I think and the way I think other analytically minded people think, and why it's such a big deal for me to be sitting here with you telling my story.
Please.
Okay.
Drop in. I'd love to hear it.
So I'll start with this and say, in general, analytical people typically are not into spirituality.
Yes.
Right? Generally not. It's the kind of thing that we treat really cautiously. In the mind of an analytical person, we are attracted to things that we can dive into and know and understand and influence, right? That's why we end up being engineers and scientists and sometimes get into the medical field and get into law and those sorts of things, right? Because they're things that we can jump in, understand, influence, and sort of control our environment. So there's a little bit of an insecurity around anything that you really don't understand well.
Yeah. It's like, even though it's there, hard to put those words to, which is
Exactly.
this whole world.
So when we're confronted with something in the spiritual domain, we usually have one of two responses, right? We either completely dismiss it and say that that's baloney, that's bogus, right? I don't know what's going on there, but I can't explain it, therefore I reject it, right? And frankly, that's the way my life had gone up to that point 3 years ago. Or our curiosity gets the best of us, right? And that's what kind of perpetuates the journey, is that if we have an experience that's tangible, if we can feel something meaningful that's not normal, and we can't explain it, the curiosity drives us bonkers. And we have to go dive in, and we have to go do it again, and we have to keep trying. We have to keep understanding, right?
Keep testing.
Exactly. And so that's what drives the excitement for me in this whole journey that I'm on, is that with the insecurities of my personality and desire and need to know, that's the way I come at it. And analytical people like me, we don't go into the spiritual world because we're trying to find healing, at least not initially.
Yeah.
We're going there because we're curious. Yeah. And I continue to be curious, and it continues to drive me right now in the things that I'm doing.
I love that. I refer to it, when you're in that analytical space, it's like, oh my gosh, that stuff is woo-woo, right? But once you tap into that curiosity space, it becomes woo. Like, it's so exciting. It's only one woo. It's like, wait, what else is possible? What other potential is there?
That's true. Yeah. And there's a big difference between the woo-woo perspective and the woo perspective, right?
Totally.
We, as a rule, do not like gurus.
Yes.
Right? We hear gurus talk, and particularly if they use language that sort of sounds scientific in order to try to explain the things that they're trying to say. Like, a lot of gurus right now will say, they'll use the word quantum.
Yeah.
They throw quantum in all the time. This is quantum entanglement, this, quantum, that. I'm like, okay, you don't understand what you're talking about. Very few people understand subatomic particle physics,
yes.
right? And you're trying to make a point by using a fancy sounding word, and it just turns me off. It turns a lot of people off when you hear people using scientific things to try to explain spirituality.
1,000%.
And so I have to be careful with my thinking not to entirely block people like that, because they do have a lot of really good things to say.
Yes.
But just the way they're trying to explain things turns me off.
It turns people off, and I think it's so important with the way that bringing this work forward. I've been in the energy work field it's going on 15 years this year, which blows my mind. Yeah. And I was that person. I'm like, this is freaking garbage. Like, I left my first energy work training thinking I wasted all of my money. I'm like, that doesn't work. Like, things that I sign up for and take trainings on now, I'm always like, I'm a skeptic. I'll leave the training a skeptic, and then I'm shown to be a believer. And I'm like, what? These things, it continues to blow my mind. Yeah. But I've been really intentional in the way that I do bring the messaging forward, because it's important to making people receptive to the information, because it's like, it really can transform your life when you learn.
It really can. It really has for me.
Yeah. Tell me what happened.
Okay, so the story starts like 3 years ago. My wife, who you've met, is very spiritual. She's really into all this stuff, and she's really open and to receiving a lot of guidance from gurus and other people who are sharing information. She gets excited about stuff. And so she's constantly reading, right? And one of the books that she had, she started reading and didn't finish, was a book by a gentleman named Jim Tucker called Life Before Life. Jim Tucker is a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia. Okay. He's actually the department chair for their division of perceptual studies there. And he wrote this book on his life's work, which is studying this phenomenon where children, sometimes little kids under the age of 6, have memories from previous lifetimes. Yeah. And so I started reading this book, and I'm like, this is really interesting. She's like, yeah, it was a little kind of too sciencey for me, but you might like it. And I was like, yeah, I actually really do like this book. This is fascinating. Here's a real researcher doing real work at the University of Virginia on something. And so Jim Tucker continued the work that Ian Stevenson started in, I think, probably like the 60s on this topic area. It's actually pretty well-known science now, and there's thousands of cases that they've documented where children have these memories, and then they can go back for a large percentage of them and actually validate some of those memories by talking to people. I've
read into these different stories, and like murder was solved with a little boy. I can't remember. Do you know the specifics of that one?
There's so many of them.
Yeah, I'm like, it's mind blowing. And then there's one guy who was like, I was this actor, and validates all of these details of this actor's life that a 4-year-old would have any idea. Right. Yeah, so fascinating.
So I was curious, right? That inspired some curiosity, and I was talking with Erin about it, and she's like, you could go see a hypnotherapist, and they could put you in a trance where you could see if you have any past life memories. I'm like, okay, that's a no thank you, right? I didn't really want to do that. And that was like right before Christmas. And so for my Christmas present that year, she bought me
Guess what was under the tree?
a session with a hypnotherapist. So Renee Brent, who is a local hypnotherapist.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know Renee?
Yeah, she has a book like How Big Is Your Butt?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, she's actually in BNI or was in BNI.
She is awesome.
That's awesome.
So I went to see Renee, and I had the session with her, sat down, and I'm like, I'm kind of like in a weird place. But I've been reading this book on past life stuff. So I'm just curious. Like, can we do a session on that? She's like, yeah, sure. She goes, have you ever been hypnotized before? I'm like, no. She's like, have you ever done like any online hypnotize? No. Like, all right, well, let's try and see what happens. And so we did. We dived into it, and it was a crazy, life-changing experience. I not only connected with a lot of memories and energies that I couldn't understand where they were coming from, I actually even connected with a spirit that I was having conversations with in this trance state. Not audibly, not speaking to Renee in my mind, having this conversation. As I tell the story, I realize I sound crazy, right? This is the fear of analytically minded people. You're telling a story like this, and people are like, oh, you're crazy. This is my experience. I can't explain that it was real. I can't prove that it was real, but it was my experience. And so she was saying all this really, the spirit that I was speaking to was saying all this really profound things to me in this. And this session lasted like 2 hours. And after I came out of the trance, I turned to Renee. I'm like, Renee, that was really effing weird. And she's like, that was weird. And I was just, like shocked at what just happened. And I'm like, was that real? She's like, oh yeah, that sort of stuff happens all the time. I'm like, really? All the time. And so I still didn't believe it. I came home, I was shocked. I talked to my wife about it. I was shocked. I just could not get it out of my mind. So the curiosity was really piqued at that point. I started reading every book I could find on this subject, like everybody who's into hypnosis and doing past life regressions and all these connections with different entities and things like that. I'm like, okay, now I need to go do this again. Yeah. So I had another session with Renee, and I went to her and said, hey, I want to do the same thing I did last time, but this time I'm prepared with questions to ask. She's like, okay. So started the trance, got really deep, and I just immediately connected with that same energy. And I asked questions like, how do I know that this is real? Yeah. And she gave me two things. That she said, when your wife comes home from work, she'll bring something unusual that she doesn't normally have with her. It's red with a white border. And she said, your best friend has something that's special to him. And she told me some things about this thing that's special, which I'll keep those details private just because of our friendship. But it's a secret that he's never told you about. Ask him about it. I'm like, okay. So, and then she said all these other crazy, profound things to me. I felt like I was tapping into this wild wisdom. And so I ended that one still feeling like that was really weird. I went home. I told my wife about it. I'm like, did you bring home anything weird from work? She's like, well, somebody gave me a gift card today. I'm like, really? Yeah. And it wasn't exactly what she said. It was white with a red outline instead of being red with a white outline. So it was like the opposite of what I was told in that thing, but it was still strange that happened.
Right.
And then it took me a little while to get the courage to talk to my buddy, but I asked him like a week later, like, hey, is there anything that you haven't told me about that has these sort of things? And he's like, shut the F up. And he goes, stay right there. And I was, FaceTiming him at the time. And sure enough, he went into a cabinet and he pulled it out and he showed it to me. I was just like, wow, you have got to be kidding me, right? So my mind is like broken at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because here's all these things that I'm experiencing that are so real and so tangible, and I can't explain any of it, right? So at this point, I kept doing it. I did additional sessions. I kept learning, but eventually I decided I need to learn how to be a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
I need to learn how to help people have this experience. And that's what drove me to do it. So I attended the same school that Renee attended. I got the same degree that she got. And I've been working with people and helping people have similar experiences ever since then. And it's been a wild, wild ride. Fun.
Yeah, so amazing to be able to have that experience. And although it's not necessarily tangible, I mean, it is. It really is such a profound thing to go through
Mm-hmm.
and to have those things. And it's like, Aaron comes home having the gift card, like these validation pieces. And as much
Mm-hmm.
as we want to try to make sense of it, sometimes there's no sense to be made. It just is.
That's just it. I think that, a lot of the processing and integration work that I've done since these sessions, you kind of come to the realization that there's just going to be things that you can't explain. And you don't owe an explanation either, right? So as I'm telling this story, I feel a little vulnerable. I feel a little like, oh, am I doing the right thing by sharing this? People are going to think I'm crazy. People will think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't owe them anything else. Like, this is my experience. It was real to me. I've now helped other people have similar experiences. It's real to them. But it's up to your individual, their own individual life to decide what's meaningful to them, what's not to them. In the process, you connect to this greater wisdom. You connect to these deeper feelings. You feel this feeling of connectivity with your consciousness to the world around you that you just can't explain unless you've experienced it. And so I feel like super, super fortunate to have had those opportunities and to be on the path that I'm on right now, which has led me to do things like explore spinal energetics and different things I never would have done prior to these kinds of experiences.
It's so fascinating. I had an experience with, I just went, I like saw a medium and they did something and she told me that my mom and I had past life connections and we've been many lifetimes together and all of these things. And I'm just like, oh gosh, and my mom and I, we have a very colorful relationship is what I like to call it. So I didn't tell her about this whole conversation that I had. And that was, I don't know, back in 2008 or something. And then years later, 2020, I was teaching an online chakra course and my mom took it. And so I was taking them through the meditations. I don't even remember which chakra it was, but I was taking them through the meditation. And afterwards, she called me and she was like, oh my goodness, it was the wildest thing. I could feel, she's like, even though we've never done that together, I knew what the next thing that you were going to say was. And she was like, and I'm laying there and I was like, oh my gosh, we've done this before. And she's taken me through this before and had this knowing. And I'm just like, well, dang, there's that tangible aspect where my mom had no idea about that call that ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
And there she was validating, that whole experience. So it's pretty wild, the things that come up beyond the session. And those are gifts.
You never know what doors you're going to open up with doing this kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And it allows you to kind of step into what some of your gifts may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that along those lines, what I don't know if it's a gift or if it's just a desire, is I like helping people like me. Maybe that's selfish, but I know that there's a lot of people who would love to experience spirituality, but just are not in a place to do it. And so I really like this idea that people who are stuck the way I was, with essentially no spiritual connection whatsoever.
Except for this wife toting her rocks around.
Right, exactly that. Yeah, right, exactly. I'd love to just help people open the door, help people experience something for the first time that starts that curiosity process for them. Because if you're driven by curiosity, there's a lot to be curious about in this area.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful thing to want to help the people who were where you were, right? Mm-hmm. Because truthfully, we can only meet people as far as we've met ourselves. And so you've met yourself in these places and you kind of know what's beyond and how to help people to get there. And that's the best place to want to help people from.
Right, exactly.
Truly.
Yeah.
I love that. Tell me a little bit more, too, about your spinal energetics experience and how that's kind of tied into what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I do with people when they see me the first time, if it's somebody that I feel is a analytical person, what I try to do is something really tangible, right? I try to show them that they themselves can feel energy flowing around them, right? And so we talk about, the antenna and the filter. So we have an antenna that we don't use, right? For whatever reason, our connection to energy around us, we can feel a lot, but we don't really pay attention to it.
We've been taught to suppress.
I think maybe, right?
Yeah, we've been taught not to.
And so it's really easy to teach people that they can feel it, right? So I go through this exercise with them where, I basically go through and maybe in Reiki classes or whatever, you've gone through this where you rub your hands together, right? You get your hands all, you transmit your hands again, the transmit mode again, all warm like this, you kind of rub them like this, all the things get them all warmed up. And then you switch from transmit to receive and you just go, boom, and observe what your hands are doing. Just observe the sensations in your hands. And you notice they were warm, they're getting cool, okay? They're also a little tingly. You get some strange sensations in your hands. Okay, now it's starting to feel a little interesting. So now, put your hands together like this, close but not quite touching. Just see what you can feel. You can feel the heat transmitting from one hand to the other. And then just slowly pull your hands apart and notice that you feel things when you do that. Strange things. You feel like it's pulling, and then you feel like it's pushing, and then you can feel like tingling sensations. And then when you start to push them back together, it pushes back. Like, what am I doing? I feel like I'm pushing on a balloon. This is the weirdest thing, right? And so that's kind of a really tangible thing you can do.
Yes.
And then you're like, all right, now when you got that balloon in your hand, now put it over your head and hold it on your head. Oh my gosh, I can feel it in my head. You're like, yeah, you can feel that energy flowing through your head, right? That's Reiki.
Yes,
that's Reiki energy. You can feel that. You can
feel
touch that. You can get in touch with that energy that's around you. And then now you can feel that on other people too, right? So with your partner or your friend, right, get your hands warmed up, get that balloon going, and hold it over the different energy points along the body. And you'll feel that it's not the same everywhere across their body. Some places will push back, some places will tingle, some places will just, there's nothing there, right? And then you realize you can push that energy around. I love Spinal Energetics because it's like that experience, but on steroids, right? So if you can get people to feel that energy initially, then you can get them to respond to Spinal Energetics. And that's cool because with Spinal Energetics, you can express and release a lot of stuff that's stored inside. And you don't have to bring it to consciousness to do it.
Exactly.
Right?
Energy goes where words
somatic
can't.
Release. Exactly.
Yes.
And so it's super, super powerful.
Yeah, I love working with it. And I was just telling Dan before, there's not one that's better than the other. We have different times where we need Reiki or spinal or, hypnosis. There's different pieces and times where we need to bring these tools along in our journey and shift it up. But working with spinal and feeling the connection between the layers and the energy centers. And when you get into the access point and to see that reaction, people, it's like there's always that there. And it's so, the potential
it is
that it brings is really powerful.
And it's so interactive between the person providing the spinal and the client, right? You're in touch with each other's energy the entire time.
Yeah.
And it just your mind goes into a different place. And perhaps it's a form of trance state when you're really into it. I don't know, but it definitely is. It's cool.
I think there is some level of trance state to it. When we're in that space of being a conduit to help with the energy flow, I think there is a space you go into, because I was doing a session and like somebody's phone went off and I was like jarred out of it, you know, and I'm not an easily spooked person. I like to hide and, spook my husband all the time, like hide behind corners and jump out at him. But like, I'm not an easily spooked person. And so, to be in a phone to ring and put me into that space, it's like, whoa, where am I at, in that time? But I'm allowing myself to be that conduit, that place for energy to flow through. So yeah, I think there is some level of trance space we go to with it.
I think so. And I think you can have different experiences each time you do it as well. Sometimes it depends on a little bit on where your mind is in terms of where your energy flows, right?
Totally.
If your mind is in a place where, hey, I'm coming into this thing stressed, I got pressure in my heart, I need to release something, right? Well, you can have a pretty powerful experience, right? Yeah. But you can also go into it in more of an observer mode. You can go into it more of like I just want to see what comes up. I just want to flow. I just want to feel connected and have an entirely different experience, right?
Exactly. And neither one is right or wrong. We don't, sometimes there is a big release that you'll have in a session. And sometimes there's this, session, and this is all energy work. I work with multiple different modalities, and sometimes the session's like a very big release, and sometimes they're just still and gentle,
Yeah.
and they walk away from each session saying, wow, I got so much out of that. So it doesn't make one right or wrong, really and truly, how big the release appears to be. Sometimes those deep internal sessions, journeys that we go on during that time are just as powerful as the big expressive ones.
Yeah. And that's why I think that, when we're working with clients and coaching clients on how do you process stuff, how do you integrate this stuff, this is your experience, right? You don't have to even fully understand it yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You don't, and you certainly don't have to explain it to other people. It can just be yours. You
Yeah.
can just allow it to be what it is, and it's
ride the wave.
Ride the wave. Exactly.
Yeah, there's so much. 15 years later, and I'm still trying to figure out how to explain it.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I so enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm so grateful that you came on and shared more. And for our listeners, where can they find you?
Well, if they would like to connect with me, they can connect over email, probably the easiest way. You can email me at revivalhypno@gmail.com. So that's just revivalhypno@gmail.com.
Amazing. I love that it's revival. My favorite chiropractor is a revival. So
Cool.
That's a good thing to be. Reach out to Ben. He is an amazing resource for you. And especially if you're one of those analytically minded people who are like, I don't know about all of that. He's the guy to see. Thank you so much for sharing your time,
really
your energy,
appreciate being here,
and just for being who you are.
Oh, thank you as well.
Thank you. We'll see you all next week. Take care.